Welcome back to All That Jam, where music has no limits. We are joined by Don Hart, arranger, composer, orchestrator, who has worked in the Christian contemporary space, the jam band world, and done some country with Lyle, Lovett, and Maggie Rose. How are we doing today?
Doing well. Nice to be here.
Very nice. Yes. So I reached out to you originally because Maggie Rose, she had been on last November, I guess, and she said that when she did her album, you were the man she went to for the strings on it, and I was like, "That's cool." And then I remembered, I guess back November, October of 21, I guess was the first time you worked with her, maybe when you did something for Osiris.
Oh, yeah, the podcast we worked on. It was the podcast Sugar Maple, and
Sugar, that was the name, right?
yeah, and I just I heard some of her music on Twitter and saw an episode of listened to an episode of her podcast with where she interviewed Jen Hartswick, and I thought, wow, it'd be really cool to work with her. At that point, we were just talking about what we needed to get accomplished in the podcast. A bunch of songwriting, and which I wound up doing some co-writing in that, but that's not what I normally do. And so it was great to get her involved and then work with Tom Marshall on a few things and that. And but yeah, so anyway, but we just kind of got to know each other from there. And I listened to her album, the one previous to the one that was just released, and I just think she has a great voice. And then working with her in the studio is like, what you see is what you get. I mean, there's no fixing. It's like, do you want this a little different? And she sings it different for you. It's all like spot on, perfect all the time. She's amazing. So yeah, it's been really, really fun working with her. Yeah.
Yeah, she is the studio is brilliant with her. I really love it. I mean, these days the studio might be the toughest thing to do because of like these skilled technologies like auto tune and things like that, to go into a studio and then on top of it to go in and do strings and stuff like that. Can you walk us through the process, taking maybe Maggie's last single as how that happens? Like, are you given the demo and you write the string sections for it? Are you in the studio when they do it?
Well, okay, so the process was slightly different with her album because she invited me to all their tracking sessions, and it was one. I mean, Ben Tanner is an amazing producer. The whole team was great. The tracking musicians were phenomenal. Most of whom I hadn't worked with before, except for the Caitlin and Kyle in her band. But it was just an amazing experience. I mean, and I'd bounce an idea off of them every once in a while in that situation, but it was mostly just, the normal tracking session. I was just there sort of getting familiar with the songs. We were, I can hear strings on just about anything. It's a matter of whether you want them or not, basically. So we went through after all the tracks were done, and good working vocals and everything. We went through and tried to figure out which songs we wanted everything on. The one that stuck out to everybody the whole process was "No One Gets Out Alive," hence it's the album title. But it's a great song, and so that was one of two songs that we actually recorded over in Macedonia. Nobody from the States went to be at the session, but we're at the session online, basically, and at 7:30 in the morning. But so they there the goal of that album from an orchestrating standpoint, and track and everything, but it was had such a live and let die kind of vibe to it already. We wanted to follow that road.
Big, yes.
Yeah. So I wrote the charts out, got them ready, and I think Maggie's been crediting me with conducting that, but I was just basically, it was more of a production role. I was listening and saying, yeah, that's really great. Or can we do this a little bit different or whatever, it was really fun. It was a great group, and that song is so compelling though. I mean, it's, there's something that just, it draws you in, it makes you think about yourself, I think, and so we had a great time with it. But yeah, we added a big symphonic horn section, and then had, I think, 40 strings. And so it has that sort of, I mean, you can, we've done sort of reduced string arrangements that smaller groups have played. We'll probably be doing that, have a string section at her Nashville show here in a few weeks on May 10th. Nice. And there's, so we'll have the strings play the string parts, but the brass won't be there. And, it can be handled, but that depth of field, if you will, is present when the big group is playing the arrangement and everything. So
there you go.
Yeah, that process that you just described, I'm assuming that it varies wildly depending on who you're working with, but do you prefer to be more closely connected to the actual recording piece, or does it really not matter, just, depending on the project that you're working on?
You mean the tracking?
Yeah.
With the rhythm section. I mean, it's nice. It's not necessary. A couple things I'm working on right now. Artist by the name of Doug James, writer, and he works over his tracks very thoroughly before I ever get to them. So I mean, it would be a lot of man hours if I was, I think, around for some of that. But yeah, I mean, it just varies. I mean, if it makes sense for me to be there for some reason, I think it was really nice in Maggie's situation to be there for, most of the tracking for the album, just to get a sense of what the album was like. And so it just worked out, and they're a great hang too. So
that helps.
Yeah, it really does.
She's fun. So let's stick with the country a little bit. Lyle Lovett. You've worked with Lyle Lovett. How was that?
Okay, well, it's I mean, it's great. I mean, I love
that come to be, and how is that different than your work you did with Maggie Rose or the guy you just mentioned?
Yeah. So that it's well, that was for his Symphony show. So I had done some work with the Kansas City Symphony, and they were doing this event that they do. I'm not sure if it's every year or on some sort of regular basis, but they go out into the original prairie out in Kansas. This area that's being preserved, and they have these benefit concerts out there. I think Symphony in the Flint Hills is what it's called. And anyway, back in 2010, I had been doing some work for them on some other things. They called me because Lyle was going to perform with them out in the Flint Hills, and they needed 3 arrangements done. So that worked well. They called me 5 years later to do 3 more. And then, when was it? Maybe 2019, they called me to do 5 additional arrangements to make like a full show of it that we did in Kansas City. And then last summer, Lyle had me do like 4 more charts and he did Red Rocks and I'm just blanking on it now. It's one of the Wolf Trap, one of the venues coming up with Trey here in a few weeks. So that's basically I'm given like studio album releases and say, okay, we want to do this song like this, and we just want to add a symphony orchestra to it. So that's a little different animal, but it's really fun. He has great material. I mean, he's just such a great writer. There's always something to grab onto in his songs and sort of run with from an orchestration standpoint. It's always a lot of fun. But so yeah, trying to think. Are you familiar with his repertoire at all?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna. There's a couple of charts I'm thinking of, and I can't think of the actual titles. Maybe I can walk over and get the scores here in just a second, just to refresh my memory. But there was one. I can't remember the name of the song right now. I'll think of it in a second. But there was one song where there was a figure in either in the bass or in the mid range of the guitar. It repeated the entire song, and it was like, it could be. I mean, it was a great song, and there was a lot of other emotion, but it was really a challenge to run with that and make it interesting and throw it around different places in the orchestra, and so that sort of thing. It's you're depending in those situations. You're depending. I mean, the orchestra is not necessarily a star, but it has a much more prominent place in the performance than on a record, where you're just adding strings, or even orchestra on Maggie's thing. I mean, the track and the performance there, it's just a different animal. So, but it's all fun.
Yeah. I'd seen an interview, and it didn't mention this song title, but some of the work you did with Lyle Lovett, and it referenced a song that had a very repetitive bass line and kind of the same chord running through the entire thing, and just working through that orchestration. I think, you just mentioned that's its own challenge too, to try to not overdo,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I mean, yeah, sometimes I gave it to the woodwinds, and I was also able to throw it was the kind of song where you could throw like sort of clustery things up top above the rest of what the orchestra is doing, and just change things up that way. But it was a challenge, but it was really rewarding and really fun.
I'm trying not to jump too far ahead into
that's all right.
but it's so hard not to.
well, let's address the pink elephant in the room. Just put out a new song, Evolve, and lo and behold, it has great production value and it has some strings on it. And then we had already been talking about doing this interview. You tweeted a piece of sheet music, so you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had a great time working on. Now I'm blanking on the name of the album. The album Fish released right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Sigma Oasis, yeah.
Yeah, Sigma Oasis, and I did three things on that, and so Trey wanted to do some more, and we did a number of things on the record, and I say we. I'll just tell you, I'll probably don't want to get in the weeds on this too far, but there are a number of arrangements on the record, string arrangements. I got a little bit of help, and I'll even save the credits for when the album comes out. But I was in the middle of a commissioned piece for the Baltimore Symphony, and the session came up very quickly, and so we I don't know. The wheels are spinning in my mind here right now, what I can and can't say. But anyway, it was fun. It turned around very quickly. I'll fill in some of the details after it's released, but there are more things on the album, and it was this one seemed to. I remember Vance Powell just listening to what we had done after the session, and this one kind of came up, and he was talking about how he thought this could be a single. So hence it's the single, or this the first one at least.
It is very catchy. It has a very catchy chorus to it. So I see that. All right, so we can't talk too much about that, but let's talk. Let's go back then. You worked with Trey on Time Turns Elastic, and then you really, I feel like your guys' relationship just exploded with the Beacon run over the course of COVID there. Can you talk a little bit about how you first came to work with Trey?
Yeah. In 2004, so it's like been 20 years now. It's amazing. He contacted the Nashville Chamber Orchestra, who I was working with quite a bit at the time, and needed somebody to do actually what he needed first, I think, was reorchestration of Gaiuti, which he had just released on anyway, he just released a studio album version of that with a full orchestra. And I think the issue was not having enough room on the Bonnaroo stage for the full orchestra, and anyway, we cut the orchestra down to a chamber size group. And I didn't know who Trey Anastasio was when he called. I had heard of the band Fish, mainly because of the weird spelling. So I was just jumping in cold to that situation, and he his big thing at that point is he wanted to conduct the orchestra. Mm-hmm. So he didn't even play on it, and I think after that he said, "I'll never do that again," or something to that effect. But anyway, yeah, he liked what I did, and we've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So I think that album, Seis de
Mayo, yeah,
which is all instrumental. I mean, there were a lot of different types of arrangements in terms of he had a quartet, I think, the Seattle 66-piece orchestra, right?
Right.
So you probably had a little bit to listen to, I guess, that would maybe show his interest and what he had already done in that space. But as time has gone on, I mean, it's been, 20 years now. I just think to myself, taking on any big endeavor in this community, the Fish community, there's a lot of opinions about it. That's probably putting it mildly, right? I mean, we think about this. I mean, you can't really factor that in when I'm sure when you're working on your arrangements, but is it ever a consideration of, how do I keep that feeling of like a You Enjoy Myself jam or something like that, but still stay true to what you believe to be the right decisions,
Yeah, I mean, I did this little seminar about it was about arranging at the time. I think it applies to orchestrating or even composing. But one of the first things you have to do is figure out who your audience is,
Mhm.
and then how to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, sometimes maybe something off the off the off the deep end weird is the right thing, because it accomplishes what you need. So you're not just trying to. Sometimes you need to, you know, pet the cat the wrong direction. And so I mean, but yeah, I definitely, but then you have to. I mean, I really try to give the orchestra something that's worth their time and attention. I don't want them sitting there looking at their watches, trying to figure out when they're going to get out of there. I want them to be interested and have something to do that has a aesthetic payoff as well. So now you mentioned You Enjoy Myself. I was, is I don't think I realized at the time, but it doesn't even scratch the surface. But I was listening to 3 different versions of that to try to figure out how to make what to do in certain sections, how just how to get through all that material, and I still think the biggest concern of it all was trying to do a vocal jam, with an orchestra and one vocalist. So, and then you just have to go with your gut instinct sometimes too. I mean, I learned something from Trey. Trey says he, as a rule, doesn't read any reviews. And he says, I'm in the process of just laying this all out for you, the best way I can. I don't know. I'm not sure what else I would do differently. So it at a certain point, yeah. But I mean, it doesn't matter. But on the other hand, he'll, I mean, just almost obsess over a set list. I mean, he can't, with an orchestra, he can't go on the fly like he can with a band. He can't say, okay, let's do this song on the spur of the moment. It has to all be, pre-programmed. And he bless his heart, he can't. I mean, he really wants it to be the best thing possible for the audience.
He definitely cares. You feel it in everything they do. He cares.
But then he can't decide on, should these songs be over here or what? All this different stuff that he's considering, and it, I don't know. It's really fun, kind of going through that process with him too. Just trying to figure out how we're going to do this.
So some set lists, some nights you could tell he's like bored with something, and he'll just cut it, and he's like, boom, we're on to the next song. Or it feels like he's like, I want to get all these songs in tonight, and all of a sudden, they're just trying to rush through things there. Let me ask you about set list for the Beacon, because before that you had written specific pieces along the way for him. With the Beacon, when he brought you in, it turned into every week having to do stuff, right?
Exactly. And it was like, the year was so weird. I mean, it started out like a house of fire at the beginning of the year. I mean, with working on the Fish album and several other things, and then it just dropped off a cliff that summer. Nobody knew what we were dealing with, so nobody did anything. And then I remember him calling me, and he called me, month and a half before all this started, and wanted strings and horns, small group, basically from the get-go. But then they couldn't figure it out with COVID, and all the testing, and stuff. So the first week was just the band. We didn't, and then when they realized they got through that, okay, said, well, let's bring in the strings, and so it was each week was a combination of arrangements we had in hand, whether or not, I mean, and they may have had to be, we may have had to alter them a little bit. Some were the symphonic things that we reduced down to just a string quintet, maybe with the help of Jeff Tansky on keys and stuff. Other things were fuller string arrangements that had to be brought down the same way, just to figure out your voicings. But then there were also new things, and so the new ones, obviously took the most time. So we kept them at a reasonable number, seems like each week. And I think there was only one thing that actually still hasn't been played anywhere. It was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Added strings to that, and I think they just ran out of time on the show or something. I don't think there was anything on the wish list that I didn't get to. There were some very late deliveries via, email attachments, the afternoon of the show.
Had you previously, you said that you really didn't know who Trey was when he first reached out to you. At some point, did you do a deep dive into Fish's catalog and know songs and have things that you had your eye on?
I wouldn't call it a deep dive at all, but I've heard things over the years. I mean, What's the Use is an example of that. We did it on Beacon Jams, but it was originally a Symphony chart. We did in Atlanta and Nashville in 2017, I think it was. And it's one that I think I was out on a walk, and I just maybe it was after it might have been after Carnegie Hall, the Symphony show we did in 2009, or it could have been after the shows we did in 2012. But I just was listening and just kind of did Fish Radio there for a little bit, and What's the Use came up, and I liked it, and then I couldn't remember what it was for a long time. And I finally found it again and suggested it to Trey. And Trey said, it's a great song. I mean, after we did it, he said, I'd never picked that song, for orchestra. There was just something about just the mood of it. I also say it was probably the hardest. It was a really difficult thing to get through because just to create the momentum in the song orchestrally was a real challenge, I guess. It's a lot. I think a lot of it, but
Evil Fish.
but I love that song and love the way that orchestration turned out.
Yeah, one of my favorite things when they end up in that at a show. It's a beautiful piece of music. How much contact work did you do directly with Jeff while you were doing the Beacon stuff? Were you in contact with him?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have gotten all that work done if he did a lot of like I'll do I want the score set up. I want like a chord chart and any melodies that are going on. I want those, on the score so I can reference them without just having to listen over, or, take too much time away from, looking at the score and keep on listening. And so he was setting up scores for me, doing takedowns. I emailed everything to him so that he printed the charts that the players read, and so it was very he was an immense help. He's and an extraordinary talent too, you know. But
Yeah. One thing that about that Beacon run, when I think back on it, just the way that even the set lists were designed, where you have the strings, you know, coming in, the rescue squad, and then they might leave for a few songs. And anytime I think of Jeff, I think it was week 2, Divided Sky, and just stripping down, you know, a song that's already elegant in its way, right, for Fish especially, but it just brought so much meaning. And I'm sure that you heard from a lot of people about how special those shows were, and how the way that we got to appreciate these songs differently, it meant even more than I think it would have at another time. Just so thoughtful. Is that something that you hear from people?
The reaction was pretty overwhelming across the board. I mean, and you know, part of it was just that everybody was trapped. I mean, you know, we couldn't do our normal things, you know, and to have this as an outlet, I mean, it was like when I was a kid, you know, Friday night was a special night on TV, you know, whatever the Friday night shows were, that, you know, you just look forward to Friday night. It was almost the same thing with the Beacon jams. But, you know, and I was, you know, a bunch of those weeks I was pretty exhausted, you know, because it was it was, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was really fun, but you know, there were, well, the one that was, you know, I mentioned other places and stuff, but Harry Hood, I had actually mentioned that to Trey in one of our conversations. You know, we were just touching on, we were sort of talking about the symphony shows a little bit, and I said, "Oh man, Harry Hood would be a great symphony chart." And then he said, "Oh wow, that would work in this context too," you know. And so I said, "Yeah, that's great. Just give me a couple weeks." You know, I knew there was some originally planned. There were some weeks that the strings weren't going to play, so I said, "Well, give it to me, you know, after that show, and then I have the week, 2 weeks to prepare it and everything." So he calls up whatever week it was, week 7, or says, "Well, good news, we're doing Harry Hood. Bad news, we're doing it this week." And so that was a challenge, getting that done. But it was, you know, and that was one of the ones where I sent charts up the afternoon of the show, and you know, I mean, I sent them parts of it as I went, but then the tail end of it was sent up that day. Okay, yeah.
I muted. I had the lawn guys outside. How
Oh,
do you approach something like Harry Hood? It's almost like a little mini. It has 3 parts to it. You know?
yeah. I mean, well, the thing I really like about working with Trey's music is there are always things to grab onto that translate to an orchestra or to string parts or whatever. You know, you know, it's just a matter of trying to get your sensibilities right. As you know, I mean, you don't want to give some of those lines, you don't want to give to the horns, and some of those lines you don't want to give to the strings, you know, but there's all stuff. And then I just, you know, it's kind of, like I said, it's what I do. I just hear other things. And I mean, it's been a while since I've listened to that, so I can remember parts of it, but I can't even remember like all the 3 sections clearly that you're mentioning. But
Yeah.
You have the Harry part in the beginning, and the "Thank you, Mr. Minor."
oh
That
yeah,
part,
right.
you know, with
Yeah.
the crunchy guitar to it, and then the bliss part, and then you have the end part that's the bliss jam.
Yeah,
You
I
can
know.
feel good about
And
Hood.
that,
Yeah.
and that, yeah, it was really fun. And
I like what you did with the Mr. Minor part, because again, like with the use, it's outside of what you normally think of an orchestra or strings contributing to something.
yeah, I mean, well, string, you know, I mean, it's funny sometimes, you know, I mean, I've I think people have learned to ask me, well, listen to some of these songs and see what you hear, because they know I'm not just going to put syrupy strings on something that's soft. I mean, there's other things. Strings can just kind of get after it too. It's really fun.
Well, I don't want to take us down this road, but I do just have to mention something that always comes into my head also is just time signatures. Fish songs can have some wacky, like really odd time signatures, and maybe that makes it more interesting for someone in an orchestral setting, maybe that's different. I don't know. That's just my thought about it. But
are you a musician?
No, but
Okay.
I try to pay attention and,
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be intimidating sometimes, but Trey, I mean, usually on the odd time signatures, there's a particular grouping that helps you, like I mean, if it's in 7, I mean, 7 seems sort of out there, but if you break it to 3 and 4 or 3, 2 and 2, da 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 da, I mean, you can get into a pattern that makes a lot of sense there. And that's one of the things that Trey mentioned to me says, everything breaks down in 3s and 2s, so then you just have to be sure and get the music. I mean, if it doesn't look right, it'll be harder to play, even if they're like the right accents and stuff. But, so, and I have an incredible music preparation guy here by the name of Stephen Lamb, and he's a great arranger and orchestrator in his own right, and composer. And, but, he lives for figuring out the best way to put something on the page, and so, because if it's not legible, not only will it be difficult to play, the musicians will tend to blow you off a little bit too, so so you just want all that stuff to be
as clean as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just
makes sense.
Be presentable.
So you have we have 2 symphony shows coming up. I guess that you're doing a little bit of work on that too. Am I right guessing that?
I am, and I'll go out on a limb here and make sure, hopefully not too far, but I'm working on one right now that is a title that we already do in the symphony show, but we're adding full orchestration to it, and that's Divided Sky. So it'll have, instead of just the string section, it'll have brass and winds.
Oh, that'll roll. That'll be like rolling thunder coming through.
I know, that's exciting.
That's fantastic. All right, let me ask you a deeper question, and then we'll wrap up in a few minutes.
Okay. Sure.
Where do you see the field of arranging and orchestrating music heading with AI looking over your shoulder?
Oh, I don't know that much about it. I guess it does more than I probably suspect, but I haven't really, I mean, if somebody said, if somebody tried to create something and said, do a Don Hart arrangement, I'm not sure what that would be, because I don't know what it would be. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I think, the creators I think anybody who truly loves and works hard doing what they do, take a lot of joy in figuring things out and doing it the best way possible, and I mean, on one hand that, but on the other hand, like a piece, you never feel like you're done with it. There's always little tweaks that you could do, but so I don't know. I mean, it seems not getting political here, seems pretty capitalistic. It's like,
Oh, it does.
you know,
I tell you, my new thing is that Spotify and even Nugs and all these streaming services don't sell music; they sell subscriptions. The
yeah,
music is free.
yeah. I mean, and there aren't many artists that are getting,
Screwed.
that are getting rich off of Spotify or whatever. I I don't know, but then I mean, at least speaking for myself, you know, uh, maybe I shouldn't say this because I'll probably get a lot of requests for work here. But if I could figure out a way to work for free, I'd do it. I mean, I mean, I love what I do, and so I don't know. It's one of those things. Give me an assignment. Let me work my way through it, and let's go. And worry about this other stuff later, I guess. I'm up a little bit tunnel vision that way, I guess.
Like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle almost, huh?
Yeah, it is, and it took me a while to figure that out. That I mean, I never did like jigsaw puzzles and stuff when I was younger, but I mean, it's obviously a different thing, but I like them a lot now. And except for the one that we put away, it was too hard.
There's always one of those,
It was an impressionist.
The one that's just a solid color.
Well, no, I mean that would have been more difficult. But this was like, so none of the colors, they all fuzzed together. I mean, it was really hard.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I don't know what'll happen with AI. I guess I just have to trust that people will be reasonable about how to use it, or
Mhm.
I mean, if something it doesn't make sense in my mind for knowing how hard all the work that goes into writing a masterpiece, or having some idea of what classical composers did and everything. I mean, I think it feels like you can get nuts and bolts right, but you can't get you can't get this magical thing that happens as a result of those nuts and bolts putting it in the right place. So, but I guess I'm not ready to be, but wondering if I'll be proved wrong on that as well. So
I have this apocalyptic vision of music in 5 years of like incidental music in movies, commercials, all be written by AI. They're going to try to, it's capitalism. They're going to try to cut out as many people as they can.
yeah,
That's the low-hanging fruit, I guess, right? Of everything. Like the easier pieces to maybe conceptualize being taken over will be some of that, right?
I guess, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's I think it just feels to me though, if you want that, I mean, there are certain special moments in any piece or movie or whatever you that is really great. I'm not sure if those special moments are going to happen that way. I mean, they'll happen, and maybe the I mean, I guess you can get AI for acting as well too, right? So
Oh yeah, there's a big thing what we talked about earlier that's scanning actors' bodies in, and then they own the rights to your image, and they can stick you in any movie saying anything that they want you to say.
yeah, be careful of the contract you sign.
Right. Yeah. Get that fine print. Exactly.
Right.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's crazy to think about, but I just hope that there are artistic minds that override some of the,
Mhm.
the you know, the the financial getting from point A to point B as economically as possible. I I don't know. Maybe I'm just old and I don't see the need in that anymore. But
I hear you. So let's talk about something happy. What other projects do you want to throw out? Anything you're pitching, working on that you can talk about?
Well, I guess the main thing is just as much as I can possibly get done for the symphony shows for Trey right now, which is, I mean, it's a big laundry list, and I'm hoping I get like 75% of what we talked about. But um, the I don't know if I'll write it anymore for it. I'm excited that there might be some other shows in between now and then, but next spring, Lyle Lovett's going to be here in Nashville, so I'm really looking forward to him being here with the home orchestra, basically. And the a couple things that I've got. Last year was just really busy between Lyle's writing and a couple other things. I did this arrangement of the Indian national anthem that we recorded at Abbey Road Studio, and there's a if you look it up, like Abbey Road, Ricky Kedge, Kej, it'll come up. There's a video of the recording session at
We'll
Abbey
find a
Road.
link for it and put it down in the show notes for everyone.
Okay, yeah. I can send it to you. But that was really fun. I mean, I had been over to London to record before, but never at an Abbey Road studio. And it was, the place is like a museum. It's amazing. There's all these pictures on the wall.
Goes to the Beatles. Huh.
Yeah. So that was really cool. The piece I was working on when the new fish arrangements came in was a piece called Network to Freedom that I co-composed with an urban artist in the Baltimore area by the name of Wordsmith. Mm-hmm. And I really feel good about where the piece came out. I missed the premiere because of a big snowstorm down here in Nashville, but I think they're going to do it again at the Meyerhoff in Baltimore. And we're talking about trying to drum up some other performances and get a recording done and stuff.
Well, if you come up to go to the Meyerhoff to do that, let me know. I'll take you out to dinner.
Oh, okay. Are you in that area there?
Yeah, I live right outside of Baltimore in Sykesville.
Okay. So you gonna make it the Wolf Trap?
I am. All my eyes are on it. Yes.
Okay.
I am trying to make that happen.
Cool. So that's the list of projects sort of tend to dwindle as far as numbers are concerned when they're all orchestrated for big orchestras. I forgot to mention the Indian National Anthem was like 100-piece orchestra. So that was not only in that space, but this huge, it's Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and, like 16 brass. I forget the numbers on the string. Anyway, it was just huge group.
There was a lot of people on stage.
Yeah. And, but that was really, really fun. And it turned out pretty cool. It's a
big bill.
Yeah.
When the invoice comes in for that one.
We did a couple things for another artist on it, but yeah, everything we got done early. So at least I took care of my end of the business there. So
right. Zappa in his autobiography bitches about symphonies and having to pay for you pay full rate for them to do the rehearsal and all. Not the fact of the symphony. He's not trying to deny the musicians anything. He's just talking about the challenges of putting on something with the symphony, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's I noticed we have 2 rehearsals on each of the shows, the National Symphony at Wolf Trap and then Tanglewood at Awesome Pops at Tanglewood. So a lot of pop shows, you don't get that much rehearsal, and but Trey's book deserves it. I think there's a lot of nuts and bolts in there.
Have you been to Tanglewood before?
I have not.
There's a Chicago 1970 video, a live video of Chicago 1970 at Tanglewood. One of my favorite shows. I mean, Chicago's just they're incredible in this. They were at the height of their powers, but I've always wanted to go there because it just seems like such a cool place.
Yeah, I mean, it's storied for sure. And now, do you know Andrew Hitz?
It's not popping off the top of my head.
Okay, so he's a big Fish fan. I mean, knows. I mean, if I have a question about repertoire, I ask him. Yes, so, but he's also a tuba player, and he played in the National Symphony show that Trey did in 2014 at the Kennedy Center. And it looks like he's playing on both of these shows as well. So I thought maybe since you're up in that area, you might know him. But
yeah, no, it doesn't ring a bell. I'm going to have to stalk him online, see if I can find him.
Yeah, he used to have a big presence on Twitter, but not so much on X. So
okay, right. Yeah, people do not like X. I still call it Twitter though, so I guess I've just ignored everything that's happened in the past few years.
I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of calling it X.
Exactly, I don't either. I call it Twitter, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
the URL is still Twitter because he can't change that.
I know. I noticed that.
Oops.
Fantastic. All right, perfect.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I hope I filled the bill okay here.
Oh, you did fantastic. You did fantastic. Let me run the end credits. You hang out so we can talk for a second.
Okay.